Hey, good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, wherever you are in the world. Talent Finders podcast would like to welcome actress, writer, producer, and entrepreneur Jo Galloway. Welcome, Jo. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks so much for doing this. It's fun.
Perfect. So, my first question is, you grew up in a theatrical world, and having both of your parents, Keith and Julia, and both very influential in the entertainment industry in South Africa, do you feel this is what influenced you, or was this something you always really wanted to do?
Well, I mean, obviously, when you're born into it, you're surrounded by it and immersed in it from year dot. So it's always been like obviously on the radar. But my parents are always very supportive of anything that Jen, my sister, and I, would want to go into or do. It was never like a prerequisite of you must go into what we do. They were very kind of like, whatever you want to do with your life, we'll support you 100%. But I think once you catch the bug, especially at such a young age, and you see how fabulous this world can be, it's something that once you start, you don't know how to do anything else because you love it so much. So, of course, it was an influence. And of course, watching my dad direct and my mom teach and see them come home with magical costumes from a costume store. I had the biggest dressing up box in the world growing up because I had all the wardrobe to like play with and have fun with. So it always just seemed like a really fun, awesome way to have a job, and do what you love. So yeah, it was definitely because of them and the joy that it kind of brought into our home. So yeah, that's kind of why I went into it, I suppose.
Perfect, thank you. So having been trained at the Waterfront Theatre School in Cape Town, what would you say some of the biggest lessons and learnings and takeaways that helped you in your career?
Training, obviously. Training is everything. Learning to have different tools in your toolbox, from dancing to singing to acting to creating, writing, directing, set building, lighting design, all those sort of things that just make you a rounded, creative person. I think training is obviously paramount, and learning how to be a triple threat. So I would say get into as many classes as possible and learn as much as you can and be a sponge and absorb everything you can. Because I don't think there's a quick fix route unless you're like in the 0.02% that, some director sees you on the side of the road and goes, oh my God, I want you in my movie, which, is the dream.
It's like a needle in a haystack, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's not reality and that's not really how the world works for most people. So I think learning and growing like through as much training is paramount. But I also think one of the biggest lessons I learned was doing things with the right motivation.
Yes.
So not going into something because you want the accolades, because you want the Oscar and, you want the fame. It's to go in because you want to do good work and you want to be the best you can be. And that's for any industry,
Yes.
Doctor, lawyer, accountant. It's doing the work and putting the work in and having the discipline to see it through and doing something with the right motivation. Because if you do that, I strongly believe the door is open for you. And I think if you don't have that in your back of your mind all the time, you're going to hit some walls along the way. So definitely those two things are big. And also be a nice person. I know it sounds silly, but being a person who's easy to work with and somebody who is easy to kind of be directed and bring something to the room or bring something to the project and be easygoing and open. That's very important because I think a lot of people think, they can be talented and that then they can behave in a certain diva-ish kind of way or whatever it might be. And a lot of people will lose parts because of that, because the director wants to work with someone who's easy to work with. And that's important.
Of course. So that leads me to my next question. You have worked both in film and in theatre. Is there one genre you prefer over another, or do you have a passion for both?
They're two very different mediums, obviously. And I think Michael Caine probably put it the best when he said acting for theatre is like operating with a scalpel, but acting in film is operating with a laser beam. And I always think that's such a great way of putting it. The disciplines are very different, and I think the process is obviously completely different. I prefer, I like them both, but I prefer theatre just because A, that's my home. That's been the majority of my training. I also enjoy kind of the what goes into doing it. So like the rehearsal process and being in studios, working and developing a character and having that journey. I also think doing 8 shows a week, it gives you such an opportunity to develop things further and find new fun things to work with. And every night's different. You know, your audience, I always say your audience is your final character, because you never know what you're going to get when they walk in, who they're going to be, you know, how many are going to be out there, what kind of crowd you're going to get. So it keeps it fresh and it keeps it new and it keeps it exhilarating. So I love that part of theatre. And I think it's also so much more of an immersive team effort, because you're working so closely with people in makeup and in the costumes and the lighting, and, you know, your tech days are long, and you have to be able, you become like a family, a really good family. And it's the same on set for TV and film. But I think because things are kind of shot out of sequence a lot of the time, or, you know, you're in your trailer or in your dressing room, you're not as immersed in the whole creative process. And once you've done it, you've done it. Whereas like, you know, you don't get, in theatre, you don't get to do 12 takes for the same scene. No. You have to be on it. You have to be doing it in the moment, and you have to be disciplined to be able to pick up whatever's going to be thrown at you. So I think both of them bring lots of different wonderful aspects. But for me personally, theatre is just, it's my home. The stage will always be my first home.
Yes, of course. So when you decided in 2012 to leave and head to the US, can you please tell us more about this journey, and what were some of the most vital lessons and learnings to those who have the so-called dream of going
to Hollywood? Sorry, I've got a bit of a cold. Wow, that's a long question to answer. I think the biggest thing I learned was to manage my expectations. I think, you know, everyone comes out going, oh, I'm going to be the next Charlize Theron, I'm going to be the next star. And it's very difficult to be in that 0.02% that's going to make it just because, you know, you're just going to make it. It's a hard city. Hollywood's tricky. And I think if you can manage your expectations of what it's going to be, instead of coming out with the stars in your eyes and thinking it's all going to be lovely and it's just going to happen for you. I mean, it can. I'm not saying it can't. I mean, of course, you know, that's the dream. But you've got to be able to just find things outside of your life that also make you happy, outside of the career, outside of the dream. Otherwise, it can be very taxing. I think to come prepared is incredibly important. Hold on one second, please. Sorry. I can just hear emails coming through, and I just wanted to put my phone on silent.
That's okay.
I think, coming out prepared is very important. So coming out, with the right working papers. So I think O1 visas are probably not the way to go. Green cards are definitely what you need. Coming out with that, coming out with financial backing to get you on your feet, because otherwise what happens is you start working in a restaurant or, you know, doing whatever job you can to make money, and then it becomes a question of that money is for living, and you don't get to actually start working on your career and going to classes and doing the things you need to do, getting the headshots, getting your actors access or your IMDb stuff up and paid for and all of that. So I think that's important. Finding a good support system is imperative, because it can be really lonely, and the highs can be high, but the lows can be very low. And I think, I mean, pretty much for me, it was, I was a little older than I should have been, I think, when I came out. And when you come out with a resume that's very theatre heavy, it's very tricky for people to start taking you seriously in the television and film world. So that, you know, then you've got to start doing things that you were doing when you just started out in your career again. You got to start right from the beginning and start building those credits in America that makes sense to Americans.
Yes, of course, because it is a very different market.
It is, and I mean, if you want to be in TV and film, and you go to LA, and that's what you do. But it's also incredibly saturated with everybody coming to LA to do it. That sometimes you feel like you might be drowning in all of that, and trying to get through that, and just trying to get one break to get you out there can be hard. So I think having all of that and having a really strong support system behind you, and of course a car. Get a car. You have to have a car. You need a car. That's important. And that's really, for me, it's been a wonderful journey. I've learned so much.
Yes.
I've been terrified. I've had to reassess all the skills that I have. And I had to be willing to learn and really go back to basics and leave the ego at the door, because you have to go back and start right from the beginning. Yes. And be prepared to do that.
Absolutely. So that leads me to my next question. As you've been living in the US for many years, how and what would you say the biggest changes in the industry have been? And how have you adapted to these changes?
Well, I think social media has played a huge part in it. I've definitely seen massive changes with regards to that. I think it's a good and a bad thing. Look, auditions are more accessible. Self-tapes are more accepted. So it's opened up a world for actors that we didn't have before, where before it was always our agent had to get us the job, and that was how we got into the room. Whereas now you do have the opportunity to go onto different websites and find auditions that are happening, kind of network your way through, and start things like your YouTube channels, or be an Instagram influencer, which of course I have no idea how to do. But
it's very time consuming. You have to invest a lot of time in order to gain a lot of attention and traction, right?
You do, and I struggle with it. I must say I do. I struggle with it because I feel, to me, it dilutes a lot of what I think the industry is about. However, I'm also, not of the millennial kind of generation, so I have to try and keep up with that, and that can be completely exhausting, because I'm not an Instagram. I don't know how to take perfect photos and do stuff like that and hashtag the right things. I try my best, but it's not really my thing. Yeah. But that said, I think that's also a very LA thing. I think the social media aspect is very big in Los Angeles, whereas in New York, I find the words that I actually heard from an agent was, we're about the rehearsal, not about the performance, which I thought was really nice. Whereas I think in Los Angeles, it's very much about the end goal, so to speak. So putting the work in isn't always there. It's more about just what we want the results to be. I think that obviously we've had a huge change in the whole casting director workshop situation since I've been here. Whereas when I first came out, you would go and pay a certain amount of money to go into a workshop with a casting director, and hopefully, that would introduce you to them and kind of give you what would be in the old days a go-see kind of meeting. Obviously, that's now being curbed a lot because of the legal ramifications of it being a pay-to-play situation, which basically just meant it came across that actors were paying to be able to have a job opportunity open up to them. Wow. So that's definitely changed, and they've cracked down on those laws big time, which again, I think is a bit of a double-edged sword, because if you are an aspiring actor or you're a developmental talent and you don't have representation, how to meet these casting directors is a whole different thing. I mean, how do you get into the room in the first place?
Yeah.
Because, even a lot of these auditions that are out there that you can self-submit for, they're not the kind of A-list breakdown ones you want. They're the kind of either student films, non-union, low budget, those kind of things, which can help you build your resume. But ultimately, you want to be going in for the proper network shows. You want to be working with the name directors, actors, producers, and really building it that way. Yeah. And the only way to do that is to actually get into a room with a casting director who's casting something like that. Yeah. So I don't ever believe that an actor should pay for an audition opportunity, and it's illegal. You can't, you shouldn't. I do think there were situations where casting directors were taking advantage, and agents and manager workshops were taking advantage of actors financially by holding these workshops, but then having no intention of actually bringing them in or following through.
Yeah.
But it does make it more difficult for us now to get into the room with the right people if you don't have representation.
Yeah.
So that's definitely shifted.
Okay.
Again, I think the LA side of it is slightly different to the New York side of it, because I've done workshops recently in New York where I feel you do get a far more educational experience, where you do get more critique on your scenes and you do get to work more, and it's more of like a 3-week situation as opposed to your 5 minutes in the room doing your scene and they say thank you very much, goodbye.
Yeah.
So it's a tricky little situation there, but we all do what we have to do, and ultimately you got to get in front of the right people.
Yes, for sure. So what would you?
I feel like that was a really long answer.
No, but it's good, because I think a lot of people, I mean, I know even from, and I mean, I'm not an actor, but, I know even from, the times that I was studying and whatever, and, you realize that, people have very delusional ideas and grandeur of what acting and getting into this industry is about. So I think it's very good that you being, your answers are honest, and you get to the root of, what the reality actually is. So it's good. So what
I don't want it to like ever feel like it's dashing the hopes and dreams by saying it's a hard slog out there, guys.
Yeah.
But it is the thing of managing the expectations and really kind of understanding that what we do is, if you want to have longevity in the industry,
Yes.
it's not just a flash in the pan, you see. And that's the thing with where we are today, is the instant kind of fame, Instagram, Insta stories, Insta.
Yeah.
It doesn't put
the gratification.
It doesn't put the back in your back of your mind. You have to have the I want to do this for the rest of my life. I need the tools to give me the longevity to do that.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is what actually, that's the biggest change for me. It's no longer about that journey. It's just everybody wants it now, and then the disappointment's so hard if it doesn't happen now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. So that leads me to the next question. What have been some of your biggest career highlights so far? What are the things that have, really?
Wow. Oh my gosh. I suppose. Okay, so here I'll tell you a little anecdotal story quickly. When I came out on holiday to LA years ago with my sister, I was driving around the Universal lot as one of the tourists, like looking at all the sound stages. And going, oh my gosh, CSI shoots there and whatever shoots there. It was all lovely. And then cut to, I don't know, a couple of years ago now, I got to work on, what was I working on? I had to think what it was. I was one of either Masters of Sex or no, that wasn't it. I can't remember which show it was, but it was the Orville. That's what it was. It was the Orville, and I was on set, and I booked a very small part on the Orville, and I remember leaving the studio and standing in the car park and being like, oh my God, I was a tourist on one of these little cars that I can see going around the lot a couple of years ago. And today I just left a trailer with from shooting with Seth Meyers, I think it was the director.
Yeah.
Hold on, sorry, Karen, okay, I need to put you on hold for 1 second. Hold on, can you just pause?
Sure.
Can you go back to just ask me the highlights of the career story again, and I'll start again on that.
So what were the highlights of your career?
Okay, so yes, I was, when I was a tourist back in Los Angeles many years ago with my sister, I was driving around the Universal lot and, seeing all the sound stages and seeing all the magical things and going, oh my God, wouldn't it be amazing to work on this lot one day? And then cut to a couple of years ago, I was shooting an episode of The Orville with Seth MacFarlane as the director, who was just amazing, by the way. He's amazing. And I remember leaving and getting into the car park and kind of going, oh my God, I remember being a tourist on these little cars going around looking at all these things, and suddenly, like, I just had this moment where I've been working on the set, and it was a small part, but it was like, okay, it's a step in the right direction. It feels good. So that was definitely a huge highlight for me. Working on Masters of Sex was also wonderful. It was the first role that I booked when I was out in LA, my first like real kind of part. And again, very small co-star, but I remember kind of getting on my knees going, oh my God, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm just so grateful to be doing this.
Yeah.
And that was wonderful as well. I've met some incredible directors and some incredible people. But I think for me, what's also been so awesome is being able to direct and put on my own work. So with Showwork, which is my entertainment and production company, being able to start creating stuff. And we did 4 short films last year, I think it was the year before, and one of which was, and it was basically learning stuff for us and also for people, it was for kids. And for kids who hadn't got any footage for their reels or they wanted to just get on set and learn. So we wrote these 4 films. And one of the characters in it is played by a girl called Isabel Marcus. And she didn't have anything. She didn't have anything on her resume. She didn't have anything on her reel. And her mom emailed us a couple of, about 6 months later. And she was like, we just want to say thank you for putting Isabel in Troubled Waters, which is the name of our short. They sent that footage through to NBC for an audition, and she booked a series regular on This Is Us. And she plays Randall's young girlfriend. And she was like, she didn't have anything, and we sent that through, and she's booked that from this footage, which for me gave me so much joy that something that we created from nothing, that didn't exist before, has given this kid an opportunity to start her career. And that for me has been such a huge highlight, and giving those kind of opportunities to actors has been awesome. I think then I have to say directing a Small Engine Repair in March of this year was also just one of the most wonderful experiences. I worked with 4 fantastic actors in LA, and we were sold out every night. We had to put seats in the front row, extra chairs in the front row. They worked so hard, and it's all 4 guys and me. So you can imagine the testosterone in the rehearsal room and kind of deal with that. But it was so rewarding and so wonderful, and to see them take a play that is it's so relevant today and so good and so well written and bring that to life. It's wonderful. For me, that's a huge, huge highlight.
Okay. So that's amazing. It's amazing. So that leads me to the next question. So you've written and produced for both theatre and film. You obviously given us some highlights and background. But what was that experience like for you? I mean, just in terms of being able to do both.
It's very different, obviously, TV and then theatre. Theatre is, again, it's a longer process. It's more detailed. For me as a director, it's more kind of detailed. I get more time with the actors. I get to like really work on the nuances. I get to take the time to do their backstories and do exercises and kind of go a bit back to drama school where you're doing warm-ups and you're unpacking certain things. So that for me is a much more, I suppose it's like a juicier steak for me to do. And I kind of can get my teeth around that and really work things. And then you get to do it again the next night. And if there's notes and if there's things that you want to try or you want to change, you get to do that. So it's really kind of very immersive as from a theatre perspective, a theatre directing perspective. Film and TV moves quicker.
Within that, sorry to interject, but within that, what would you, so the difference between that and then when you are personally preparing for a role, how do you go about this and what is your preparation process?
For me personally, preparing for a role?
Yes.
I think my process, that's always such an interesting question when people ask me, because I think you do take a little bit of everything. You know, you do take a little bit of the Stanislavski and the Meisner and the Hagen and all of that in your subconscious eventually. I no longer sit down and go through like, this is how I would prepare if I was doing method, or this is how I prepare if I was doing Meisner. It's kind of, you take little bits, and as your career develops and as you develop as an actor, you amalgamate those kind of bits and pieces into a skill set that works for you. I don't think there's any right way to do it.
Okay.
I think that you've got to put in what I call couch time, which is sitting down with your script and reading it and working it and trying to give it as many different interpretations as you can. Just, especially if you're doing, this is mostly for audition prep for me, because if I go into a room, I want to make sure that I've given it as many different colors and I'm prepared in as many different versions, so that if a casting director throws something at me, I know that I go, yes, I know that version of it. I get that version of it. I've worked that version of it. Because you have one job when you leave the room, and that's to go, I couldn't have done anything differently. I couldn't have done anything better. And then you throw the sides away and you leave it in the lap of the gods and you just forget it, because you can't have it in your head. Your most important thing, obviously, is know your lines. You've got to know your lines, and you've got to understand the context of those lines. Again, for TV and film, it's a little bit different for me than theatre. In the television and film world, sometimes you get sides in front of you that are dropped into the middle of season 3, episode 2, and it's a show you haven't seen. So you need to do your homework. You need to go and see who the other characters are, whether you're auditioning for a co-star, a guest star, a series regular. Is this somebody who's driving the scene forward, or somebody who's the fodder for the main character? There's all those kind of things you take into consideration. Also, where in the season are you? Is this the pilot? Are you establishing a character for the first time? Or is this an established show and you're slotting in with somebody who's been on the show for 100 years? So you've got to do that technical stuff. Get onto IMDb, see who the directors are, see who the cast is. If you don't know how to pronounce a name, look it up. Because you should be able to walk in when they say to you, have you got any questions? Unless you really have a burning question, you should just say, no, thank you, I don't, and be able to get on with it and know what you're doing. I think you have more time, again, with theatre, because you're in the rehearsal process. You can really unpack those characters. A lot of the time for television and film, because it moves so quickly and the turnaround is so quick, you get the sides the day before, the night before, 2 hours before. And your cold reading skills have got to be up there as well if they throw something at you at the last minute. And it's about really doing your homework in a timely manner and going in fully prepared and arriving on time. You have to get there on time. And I think that's pretty much my process for it. I think a lot of the time as well, I rely a lot on my instincts, which I'm not saying that's instincts because of training, not instincts instead of training. So I think now I'm at a stage where I can read a script and go, yes, I get that character. Yes, I understand where that character comes from. And a lot of the time, my first choices, I feel, are my better choices and my strongest choices, because it's instinctive and I can really feel it, because you're seeing it for the first time on screen or on stage. So when I read it for the first time, I like to feel that I've evoked that emotion, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely. So that leads me to kind of, well, I guess it's controversial to some people, but over the past 2 years, and obviously it's been going on for decades, so it's not like it's something new, but I think over the past 2 years, there's been, it's been highlighted around sexual harassment in the film industry, in the world of entertainment. On this, do you think there are real changes happening to protect women, or do you think that we have a long way to go?
I think this is not a new problem. I think this has been around forever and ever, as you said. I think the spotlight's now shining on it brightly, which is fantastic. I think we're making good strides forward. I do think we still have a long way to go. And I think, just even from, equal pay for female, male actors, all that sort of stuff, we're still trying to work on that. I think it's definitely changed, and I felt a change in a work environment. If I go to a set now, I find it kind of has gone the other way a little bit in some instances where male friends of mine will be like, I don't want to even tell you that you look nice today because I don't want you to feel like I'm kind of hashtagging me too on you.
Yeah.
And so some, if there's these kind of weird levels where no one really kind of knows how to
You don't know where the
behave.
line is. That's the problem.
Yeah, which is not a bad thing because I think we have to go there to find the middle ground.
Yes.
And I mean, yes, I can tell you I've been in very interesting situations in my career with a variety of high-powered creatives.
Yes.
And some of the stuff would just blow your mind. But thank God, I had a good family upbringing, and I understand what my worth is and how not to get a role and how not to completely destroy my career. But a lot of these times, actors back in the day, they didn't know. We didn't have a choice. Women didn't have a choice as to how to move forward, and we used what we could in front of us.
Yeah.
And but I'm not saying that's the conversation shouldn't be. The conversation should be more about why we still feel like we have to use our sexuality to get on an even playing field. And that is so frustrating because we shouldn't have to. Our talent and our ambition and our drive and our training and our whatever should speak for itself. But we are still in a climate that's very male driven.
Oh, for
but
sure.
I do think we are making strides forward. And I think as women, we have an obligation to hold each other up and to support each other and to speak for each other and allow us to shine as a group, as females in the industry, because there is so much talent in the female side of the industry that needs to be shown.
For sure. So that leads me to my final question. What would be the your three pieces of advice that you could give as an entrepreneur and an artist and a creator?
3 pieces of advice. Please.
Well, I mean, I tried to keep it to a minimum.
Yeah, no, I can understand. Surround yourself with people who support you and have a strong support system. That's imperative. That'll get you through some dark times.
Yes.
And also be there cheering for you when you're on top,
Yes.
Find things outside the industry that make you happy, because as much as we don't want it to determine who we are, a lot of the times it does, because you are selling yourself. You are your business. You are the entrepreneur and the manager of your own business, which is you. So, yeah, I think that's important. And I think I'm trying to think of a really what would my dad say? Because he was my kind of guru on everything. Don't sweat the small stuff. It's all small stuff, and keep that in perspective. Keep the perspective of what we do, and what it is, and just remember that you're doing this because you love it, because it's enjoyable. And every time you go into an audition, don't think about it as an audition. It's a chance for you to act. It's a chance for you to do what you love. And that takes the pressure off a little bit, for me anyway.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And hopefully we can have you back in the future and see how your career is progressing.
Thank you. Well, yes, we'll see. This move to New York has been an interesting new chapter. So here we go again.
Thanks, Jo, and have a great day.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks so much for your time. Much love.
You too. Bye-bye.